give me some good advice on dealing with container security.
Good advice is to make sure you scan your containers for any hard-coded and plain text secrets in the image and also in the files that that used to create them.
Ah, that is good advice. All right. David Cross, please counter that with some bad advice on securing your containers.
Well, I think everyone says that you shouldn't put secrets, in a container. So all you have to do is you obfuscate it, right, in your source code, and no one will ever find it.
Ah, that's very not good. All right. Do him one better, Mackenzie. Give me some worse advice on dealing with containers.
Always execute the container as a root user. Never use any other than root users. These have the most permissions, so therefore you can do the most amount of things.
It's less confusing when everyone's a root user, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's begin.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
Welcome to Super Cyber Friday. Today's topic is hacking container security, and we found out 2 ways not to do that and 1 way to do that. But it's an hour of critical thinking about how to shine a light into an image's somewhat black box, for that matter. All right. Our guests today, you just met them, Mackenzie Jackson. He's the developer advocate over at GitGuardian, and David Cross, who's the CISO over at Oracle SaaS Cloud. Our event is sponsored by this little owl right here. It's actually GitGuardian's logo. Thank you so much, GitGuardian. They've actually been a phenomenal sponsor of the CISO series, and we appreciate them doing this and, more importantly, picking this topic, which I think is a great topic. All right, lots of different ways to participate. You all know them, but the big ones I want to just point you to is number 2 and 3. For our bad idea, it's how not to secure containers. So just label it bad idea. And tips to improve container security. Actually, you don't have to write 10% better. You can just write 10%, but write 10% : and your tip. And we will provide those later. Also, you can vote in the polls, bring me on, ask a question. Notice we are in version 2. The question is to the right, the little question mark. Click on that, ask your question. Please get them in now, actually. And here's today's schedule. Good advice, bad advice, your bad ideas and good ideas. We'll play the public interest. We'll have polls go live. We'll play the department yes. Last question and advice, and then we'll have our meetup. I know you like our meetup, right? Stick around for that if you've never done it, because it's a lot of fun. And then lastly, I just want to point you to the giant rectangular box up at the bottom of the screen, which says, join us on October 13th, 2023 for Hacking the Risks and Rewards of AI. That is going to be next week's Super Cyber Friday event. Please click on that right now. It just opens up another window, and you can register for that while not coming out of this at all whatsoever. So let's remove that from the stage and get our team back on. And let's actually set the stage, because I'm going to guess there are a few people here who are not fully savvy on what the heck containers are and what they do. And I'll admit I'm one of those people. So I'll start with you, Mackenzie. Just set the stage. What the heck are containers? Why are they important to development? Why do people developers go nuts over them too, for that matter?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this topic can go very deep and very confusing, so we'll keep it high level.
But just set it high level just so everyone understands what we're talking about.
So a container is essentially an environment which you can run your application in, except not only are you running your application, you're running everything your application needs, including a very lightweight operating system and the libraries or dependencies that you have. So not only can you ship your application, you can ship everything your application needs. Well, one of the confusing things is kind of knowing the difference between containers and then orchestration kind of frameworks and things. So container technology is like Docker. It's a very popular one, Docker images. And then an orchestration framework might be something like Kubernetes. And what that is Kubernetes basically manages your containers. So if you have increased load at a certain time, it can spin up some clusters of lots of containers to manage that and destroy it when the load goes down. And then you can set different rules on that. So you have containers, and then you have orchestration platforms that manage those containers. And that's hopefully gets everyone to the same page.
What would you add to that, David? Do you think Mackenzie did a good enough job explaining?
No, I think it's really good things. I think that the one thing I like to call out is that containers and applications and containers are the future, right? But it's going to take a little time to get there, right? We're not moving from the base metal everything and all the VMs and everything's been refactored, but containers are where almost all new applications and services are being built. And I think that's where it's very, very important to understand that and really maybe dive into a little bit from a security perspective.
Very good point. All right, let's get into now the issue at hand, which is we're talking about security. Now that we sort of all have the basic understanding of what containers are, let me just ask this: is there something inherently wrong with containers that makes them a security issue? Either one of you jump in on this.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with containers, but like everything, there's more things that can go wrong when you're taking control over these. And like a container is no less secure than bare metal, right? Mm-hmm. But it's or more secure for that matter. But you have a lot more control, and a lot more things can go wrong. And so, particularly when you have developers working in containers, and these things can be a black box, right? People, they can build them, but they don't really understand them, so you don't know how to secure them, because we're now asking developers to do the jobs of architects as well, right? Often, like when building this. So they're not more secure, but lots of things can go wrong if you're not careful when kind of building up these containers and managing them.
Well, here is where I can't resist. It's like the key word I think that Mackenzie used is build, right? So it's natural is that you build a container, but are you building it with everything you need? And how are you building the container, and how is that secured?
And how are you managing the container, and how is that secured?
So this is like a common issue with a lot of new technology. We get this great new technology; it's got all this new capabilities, but with the new capabilities comes it adds new complexities to security. So let's walk through the steps. I'm going to start with you, David. First of all, what has been your experience with containers and securing them historically?
Well, I think the big element is that just like, I hate to say it, just like normal systems and VMs and things like that, is you have to patch them. They need to be patched. But I think what's different a little bit about containers is, does it make sense to scan these ephemeral, things that may only exist for a few minutes or a few hours, or really scanning your repos, your repositories, and knowing that something needs to be patched and really building up new images in new containers? But it's really easy, especially for these lightweight, servers that are stood up very quickly, but they have the same vulnerabilities that you do in a VM, right, or a bare metal system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agreed with what you said there about securing and scanning this, like the source code, because a lot of the declarative code that we write to build these and maintain these containers, it's basically source code. And this is where we find the vulnerability. So yes, you can scan your image, and there's certain things you definitely should do that. But if you scan the source code and what you're doing to build it, and you're going to find these vulnerabilities quicker, you're going to be able to help secure it. And there's great tools that can do that. Love it.
By the way, these bad ideas are very contrary to your advice here. Like containers should be accessible anonymously, saves time, from Buckaroo B, and also running containers as root, like we came up in the beginning, with access outside the container. These are just spectacular bad ideas. So where have you seen the most common problems? Like, especially when someone's getting very eager to launch containers in the development environment, like, this is the first thing you're going to see that's going to crop up. David, you're nodding your head.
Well, certainly, I think we talked about vulnerabilities and things, but there's everything else of kind of like, hey, are you running everything with the shared namespace, with the host and the container? Are you exposing the ports? In the end, if you're on the internet, are you going to leave every port exposed to the internet, right? Are you going to have unauthenticated interfaces, right? And everything's running as root. I mean, those are the ones that just jump out immediately. It's amazing as people dive into this new space and go quickly, they maybe don't look at the fundamentals as much.
But it's funny, like everything you're saying, and I'm sorry jumping in, but everything you're saying is literally like, you could just say that for practically any sort of environment. Here's a new thing that's got a lot of parameters, secure it. I mean, yes, Mackenzie?
Yeah, but one of the especially challenging things is that, when you're building something like a Docker image, and let's say you don't specify the user to execute the container, it will default to root. So the default of a lot of these is insecure. So that's another level of challenge when you're coming from this, is that, and this is a gripe that I have with a lot of things. In my opinion, it should be hard to make something insecure. It should be hard to make something insecure and easy to make it secure. But that's the opposite of what we see, especially with this technology. So now we're saying to people, and also to developers and architects, and say, hey, I need you to spin up this brand new technology. By the way, if you don't know the technology perfect right now, we're going to create a whole bunch of really insecure, vulnerable images and containers. That's kind of what I feel like. It's like, where's the opportunity to grow?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about I think you mentioned briefly at the beginning, but as part of the security discussion. Oh, we have some questions. I'm sorry, I'm completely ignoring the questions that came in from our audience. Let's go straight to that. Here's a good question from John Procap, who asks, how are containers different from serverless? So like AWS Lambda. Who wants to jump on that one?
I'm waiting for you, David.
This thing's like, I think that there's an element of that, serverless is a container is certainly a fundamental, right, of operating a microservices, in serverless, environment, right? I think that's a big part of it. I'm not as familiar with Lambda myself, but I think it's still part of the fundamentals versus, hey, these, full stack, virtual machines and such.
To kind of get like, not too complicated in here, but also like when you're using these serverless, things, often those serverless services are containers that have been spun up for you to use. So you kind of are using a container in a way through it. It's just not your container. So often these things, particularly with serverless applications, because the load changes so much on these different things that they need to be very dynamic in how they spin up environments for you to be able to do that. So they are kind of using containers, but I think a difference is that with serverless, it's a service. You're using something else, and with containers, you're managing that all yourself. Hopefully, that makes sense.
Let me ask this question from Anthony Eben. It looks like, and this is a good point here. If I'm a malicious actor, how can I even benefit from a poorly orchestrated container if it is behind a secure network? Could you describe how a malicious actor would compromise a larger network via a compromised container? Let's see what is the behavior.
I'll jump in on that one. Certainly, there's an element of coming back again to secrets, right? And still, there's a lot of cases where developers or IT professionals, they're embedding the secrets or the credentials, or URLs, into the container, and it's just like in the Windows domain environment, right? Once you got credentials, then you laterally move, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Instead of using, vaults and key management systems types of things, and I think that's the number one that jumps to mind immediately.
Yeah, I mean, definitely true. There's so many secrets. I'll share some research later on that will blow everyone's mind of how many secrets you can find inside containers.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it now.
Well, so there's actually, GitGuardian has done some research into this, but actually a university in Germany just released a really comprehensive study that I will cite now. So it's the RWTH University in Germany. They scanned 337,000 Docker images. And anyone want to take a guess how many contained secrets? What percentage of them?
All right, let's see. Let's give the crowd about 30 seconds on that. While they're figuring that, I just want to remind everybody to click the button at the bottom of the screen which says "Join us" on October 13th, 2023, for hacking the risks and rewards of IT. Okay, 70%, 87%, 80%, 37%. 7%.
These are very high percentages.
25%. I would say these high percentages are scary. All right.
Yeah.
What is the correct answer, Mackenzie?
I feel like we're going to disappoint everyone now. The correct answer is 8.5%, which I mean, this is lower than that, but you can think about it. Like we're talking about like credentials to give you access.
Yeah, you don't need. Yeah, that's 8.5%. No, yeah, 80% would be a catastrophe. 8%
yeah.
is
80% would be.
awful.
So you can download as a malicious actor. You download 20 images, and one or two of them are almost guaranteed to have plain text secrets. So, and they found 52,000 private keys. And what was really interesting is they matched these private keys with public keys on the internet to prove that they were actually being used and what they were being used for, and 2,900 cloud keys they found from these images. So it's wild what is out there in terms of like hard coded credentials.
Look, a crook doesn't need 80%, but 8% makes a crook plenty happy. All right, we got our first game.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, here we go. The public interest. Everyone knows how this game is played. All right, this game is not easy. I will tell you that I did not create this game. One of our producers, Rich, did, and I played it, and I got 3 out of 4 correct. So let's see if you can beat me. All right. So here we go. Whoops. We go here. Why is this? There we go. Okay, most average monthly search queries: Kubernetes, LXC, or Docker. Which gets most?
It's A or B. A or C. A or C. I'm gonna go with A because I think it's more confusing, so more people are searching for it. I'm going Kubernetes.
I'm going to go with Kubernetes as well, right? I think that's kind of become the de facto standard for containers.
Okay. And the correct answer is no, Docker by a wide margin. All right. Well, your chance to go 4 for 4 is now out the window. Sorry.
Last time I played this, David, I was 1 for 4, so I just want to beat that.
There you go. Okay, so let's see if you can beat that. All right. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Pod, node, or cluster. Now, this I can't stress this enough. This is all searches, so it's not geeks just searching, but everyone. So think of the word if it could mean something else in some, not just about technology, and the fact that someone might be searching it.
I'm gonna go with D, pod. I feel like that could have other meanings to it. If we're just talking about Kubernetes or containers, I'd say cluster, but I'm going to go D, pod.
I'm going to take the risk here and go with the F, cluster, right? Because the pods are always part of a cluster. I'm going to take a risk here.
All right.
Based on my history, that's a good plan, David.
Correct answer is node. You're both wrong. You're still 0 for 2.
10 people searched for pod.
I guess this is why container security is important, and we all need to learn.
What? I don't understand why pod is so low. That's bizarre.
I don't.
All right. Next one. YAML or manifest?
YAML for sure. G.
Yeah, and YAML for sure. I agree.
All right. Let's see.
Go!
Oh my God. Just keep swings and misses. Endless swings and misses.
I want to know what search engine this is. Is this like DuckDuckGo?
Google. What is it? It's I forget the name of the tool. Rich, type in the name of the tool that we use for this game. All right, last one. Hub, registry, or Helm?
I'm going to jump in and say, I'm going to say registry because everyone's a Windows user, right? And they want to hear about the registry.
Yeah, searchvolume.io. That's the name of the thing we use.
I'm going to go with Helm because you could be searching for the helm of a boat as well. So
okay. So registry and Helm. Registry for David, Helm for Mackenzie. Will they both go 0 for 4, or will one of them actually get 1 correct? We're going to find out. They both go 0 for 4. Good job.
Wow.
I feel like that's
I think, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, producers of the CISO series, I believe that is a first for both guests going 0 for 4.
Wow.
I believe that is the first. I don't think we've had that happen.
It's clear I need to go get the container security book today, this afternoon.
That might help you. All right, let's get to the questions. We had a couple more left. By the way, get your questions in. Oh, this is a good question from John Santiago. Okay, let's say you've done your due diligence on your containers. You have, done many of the things you talked about with the vulnerabilities, parameters, permissions, things like that. How do you test the strength of your security infrastructure for your containers? And that comes from John Santiago.
I'll jump in, right? Certainly, it's
I can jump in, but
yeah.
sorry.
Let me. I'll start with the one that's like certainly it's just like we do with other things, right? You have your SaaS, your DAST, right? Your SCA, right? Your scanning, right? And also your pen testing and red team, right? Is that it's taking everything. Nothing changed for that, right? You do the same things just with a slightly different infrastructure.
All right. What would you add to that, Mackenzie?
Well, I mean, one of the best ways to test the strength is to really use tools to at the kind of during the creation process and at the end of the creation process to be able to test it. So there's some great tools, scanning them for secrets, trying to identify if you have any vulnerabilities in the dependencies. So using tools like that to make sure that your containers, are hardened.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's go to another. Here, we're done answering that one. We've got a couple more. We'll quickly get through these. From Larry Rosen. What's the worst thing you can do security-wise when planning a move to containers? We actually discussed it. What's the best way to start that journey? So actually, what we've been discussing here. But, I mean, you said some humorous things. Are there stupid things that people traditionally do? And maybe it's doing nothing. It's probably the traditional stupid thing people do. Mackenzie, David, who wants to jump in on this?
I definitely have an opinion. The one thing I'm going to say is I think one of the worst things you can do is what a lot of things have done as we move to the cloud. You just shift and lift everything. Like, hey, here's everything that was my VM. I'm now going to jam it and get it to run in a container. No, the whole idea is you build it with the bare minimum and those type of things. And that's really the most important thing you have to start with, right? Is you build what you need and not taking all these other things and filling up this container that's unmanageable.
Mm-hmm. Anything add to that, Mackenzie? Did we lose Mackenzie? Mackenzie's frozen. Mackenzie, you there with us? Mackenzie, you're moving. Mackenzie? What's going on?
Oh, I think we found that it's AI.
Whoops. What happened to Mackenzie? Did we lose him? I can't tell. Hopefully we'll get him back. Hold it. David.
Yes.
I'm looking in the back channel. Hold on, everybody. We're finding out what just happened. Mackenzie, internet. Okay, he's having internet issues. The two Davids will handle it from here on in until we get Mackenzie back. We'll get Mackenzie back. Not to worry. It will happen. So the what he here? I'm going to move him to the stage left. I'm just going to keep him there off to the left.
Okay.
And we'll see when he comes back, if you will. When did you start introducing containers in your environment? Let me ask, were you at Oracle at the time it was being introduced?
No, I think it started even before my time, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think as there's many applications that are monolithic and things like that, but really it all starts with, when I say next generation applications and services, is that not just continuing with monolith, but really, moving to the next features, the next capabilities. They really should be containerized or microservices, right? And I think that is really where the industry is going. Now, I think a lot of people saying, why is not everything containers to this day, is because it's not realistic to refactor everything overnight. And many enterprises and businesses maybe don't have that skill set yet. So it's going to take a little time, but I don't see things being built in the historical waterfall, monolithic, architecture anymore.
Well, from the development standpoint, containers is the value of containers is very visible. And, essentially the modularization of programming and development in containers. Now, what is the security benefit here? And are we making the poll live this early? Excuse me, I'm just seeing this. Let me know in the backstage chat whether we want. I can't remember the time. I'd have to look at the thing. But if the development benefits are so clear, are there any clear security benefits to containers, David?
Well, absolutely. I think as what I mentioned before is when things are, much more smaller, right? You don't have all these additional overhead and systems and libraries that you're not using, right? You can get it down to the bare minimum and having much more tighter control, over it. It's also the element is there's going to be vulnerabilities, right? Whether it's third-party libraries or other types of things. And with this more ephemeral, easy to deploy environment, right? You always keeping it up to date. You're constantly scanning your repository, you're updating it, and right? Great. let's now just build out, roll out the new images, the new containers, and you can do it almost seamlessly versus, wow, let's go through a major upgrade and outage, right? So it's so much more seamlessly now, and that's one of the major benefits. Is we all say when you can patch faster with no downtime, that's number one. Second is, of course, MFA.
Second, hold it. I thought MFA was number one.
Well, it's always an argument. Is MFA most important or vulnerability patching is most important, right? I think we can have a big debate on that one.
By the way, just a message to my producers in the background, please just don't wait for my cue on the poll. Just drop it and let me know that you dropped it, so I'll let everybody else know as well. So yes, just drop the polls. All right, new questions in, and hopefully we're going to get Mackenzie back sometime soon. Hey, this is a really good question from Stephen Tatum. Here, let's start answering this, and maybe you've done this. Okay, the poll is live. Hold on, I'm going to get it, and you go ahead and we'll talk about the poll in a second. But I'm going to ask you, Stephen Tatum asks, is a container a good method to allow legacy apps and operating systems to persist in organizations which still require old tech to run their business? Interesting question. Have you done that before, David?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies have, right? Certainly. And I think it's a good step forward, right? But, it's also the same time as you have to say that, hey, you've done a lift and shift, just like going to the cloud. Does everything magically, change and protect it, right? No, you have to do other things as well. But it's a good step of getting your familiar and operating in that environment, especially when you have the capability to change your images quickly and redeploy them versus going through the expensive, upgrade and deployment process.
Yeah, and I would assume it's easier. Also, you can treat those environments very differently than your other environments because they probably need a little bit more kid gloves than your other environments as well. And also, you know what it's more susceptible to than anything else. Because especially like if you're dealing with old operating systems, they're just never ever getting upgrades and patches, and you got to be kind of on top of this kind of stuff a lot. Last one here. I'm going to go this one here. Done answering this. And last question we have here. This comes from Roger. Since containers are source code, would malicious actors re-engineer the container and put it out in a group living in a Kubernetes group? I don't completely follow, but do you understand?
I'm not 100% sure, but certainly I think as Momus, maybe Roger's kind of implying what we know is like, the kind of the supply chain security and things like that in the build process, right? Certainly we know that don't go after the containers directly. It's like, just go to the source code, get something in there, put in a Trojan, or take control of the build process, just like we saw with SolarWinds, right? And I think that's one of the big risks that we're seeing out there with other things why we're seeing a lot of the great spaces where we're seeing like with Ox Security and others, right? Looking at the greater end-to-end piece of the CI/CD pipeline, the attestation, right, of what's being done. So what you're putting out there and using has actually had some validation.
Let me make something clear to everybody about the polls. We are doing something slightly different, and this has to do with the limitations of the new version of Crowdcast. So I know a lot of you submitted bad ideas, but we had to do a thing where we do a pre-edit of the bad ideas and put out what we think of the top 5 or 6 bad ideas. I think it's the top 5 right now. So there's only 5 to pick from of the bad ideas. Mm-hmm. Please pick your favorite of the bad ideas, which David and hopefully Mackenzie will be back. We'll be playing the Department of Yes at I think 40 minutes past the hours when we do that. So in about 12 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have the schedule up in front of me right now, but I think that's when it is. So wait, do we have Mackenzie? Are you back, Mackenzie? Mackenzie, did we get you back?
I hope coming on board.
Do we have 10% better ideas? Let me know in the back channel. Come back. So I don't know if we have any 10% better ideas, but hopefully we do. We are done with all our questions. So please, if you have more questions, get them in. And if you have not registered for next week's Super Cyber Friday, please do that as well. Mackenzie is struggling. His internet. Ooh, we've all had horrible internet issues.
No fun.
Is there a different education one security person needs for doing all these container security issues? Or is it a lot of the same thing, but just a new environment?
Well, that's a great question, David. So I really think about it myself, right, is that I think there's an element is, being a developer is when there's a new language, right, there's new technology, let's say a lot of people are now using Rust, right? There are things to learn, right? And I think it's very, very important, right, is that it's not just like a new thing. Oh, it's a virtual machine. It's just smaller. Like, no, the orchestration, the security controls, some of the limitations and how it's managed, deployed are different. And I strongly recommend, education and learning in this space and not just jumping into it without understanding actually how it works and architected. I think that's very, very important.
Very good point as well. Let's go to your staff and when they're dealing with containers. Do they complain about things specific to containers in their work environment there?
Actually, no. And I think I have to admit we love is there's an element is when you think about something that's a monolithic, VM and things like that, it's like, okay, we have a vulnerability. Are we going to take it, right? What's the downtime? But the container is saying, great, let's fix it in the source, right? Let's build a new image, right? And let's deploy, very, very quickly. And so there's so much benefit for that you're not questioning of, can we get this upgraded in time? Is it worth, when do we have an outage? It's like, but containers, it's very ephemeral, it's very dynamic. And I think that wins over everything.
Okay. So, I mean, even the security people are seeing the value of
Absolutely.
this. All right.
Without
Steve Giguere, who is with Palo Alto Networks, asked this question, which I think is excellent. We use containers out of our direct control. Whoops. Oh, we just clicked done answering. Hold on. How do I go back to that? I didn't want it to be done answering. Hold on. I was just trying to read that answer. We're going to go back to that. Top one. We use containers out of our direct control. Example, GitHub Actions. How do we ensure these are secure? Do you know how to deal with this, David?
Well, I think this is an interesting, question in itself, right? Is that of everything around the world is kind of moving to SaaS services, right? We're consuming SaaS services, yet it's not under control. That's one of the benefits of SaaS, right? Is that you don't have to manage the infrastructure, you don't have to do the scanning. But a lot of people saying that, well, how do I know that it's secure? And I think this is an emerging question in the industry. I don't know if there's an easy answer to it that, for that space versus actually, the attestations and the certifications and the audits that are performed. So I think it's a good question. And I think as in the industry, we're still kind of debating on the best way to solve that.
Here's an interesting 10% tip that came in from James Sparenberg. Spend time eliminating executables and libraries you don't specifically use from the container. Do you do that? Are there a lot of executables and libraries sitting in containers that shouldn't be there or don't need to be there?
Absolutely. Right. And I think that's where I mentioned a little bit, earlier is that it's like building up the image, right, of exactly what you need versus like, hey, piling on everything saying, well, we used, log4j and libcurl, other types of things like, well, do you really need that? Well, not. So it's really build it from scratch, with the bare minimum and don't add other things. So I think that is really the best practice in versus lift and shift, take everything you had and don't worry about it later.
Another question I have is, where is organizations often, and again, is it any different, honestly, to tell? All right, here, I'm sorry. That was my question. I want to go to the audience questions. This comes from John Santiago. It says, how do you secure yourself when a majority of tools nowadays are built using open source code that bases that haven't been updated in the last few years? Okay, well, this is common. I mean, everyone's freaking doing this right now. I'm sure you're dealing with this constantly. Yes, David?
Well, I think one of the things I could say in our world, right, is like our Fusion application, right, is that we actually don't use, libraries, right, and things like we build everything from source, right, but we're a larger company and things like that. So the thing is, I think some of the other providers may do this as well, but that's one of the ways we have to do. Now, this is where I think that a lot of the supply chain, security companies like, Ox Security and others are trying to help in identifying that because you may not have the skills and tools to do that yourself, and you need to understand where things stand.
Very good point. All right. Lots of good questions. Again, please feel free to get them in. Hopefully we're going to get Mackenzie back. See, the sad reality of internet. It doesn't always stay with you, does it? And also, he's not in his home, so he's in some other location for that matter that has decided to crap out on him, unfortunately. But such is the way. All right.
So Bucker says, Mackenzie, okay, yes, it's just the internet's not okay at the moment in Cyprus, it looks like.
So yeah, Mackenzie's fine. That's not the issue. Uh, so let's go to talk about Docker. Docker is a widely used container platform. What are components of Docker images that we should know about, and why do they require proactive security measures?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. Is like Docker very popular, right? But I think there's a lot of risks that with Docker, right? Is by default, right? Is like unsecured communication and network traffic, right? Is by default, right? So that if you can have all network traffic between the hosts, right? Or between all containers on the same host, that's not a good thing, right? So it's not necessarily secure by default in that. The other element is access to the files and the processes, right? They're not restricted by default, right? So this is just like where things like SE Linux come into play, but they're not there by default. I think there's the element of, we talk about patching and other types of things. The other element is really the images. We have repositories around the world. It's easy, like I think as I don't think who on the chat here that said, hey, cut and paste, from John Prokop, I hope we got your name right, said at least copy and paste from Stack Overflow, right? In some ways, people are like the copy and paste of the images that they find. Oh, that's going to work for me. You don't know what in the world's in there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the challenges. It's great, just like Windows was in the very early days. You can write anything and do anything, and guess what? Sometimes the anything can be bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, this just goes back to this common theme that we see, that it's new technology is a double-edged sword. It has this one great capability, and the more great it becomes, the more essentially susceptible it becomes at the same time. And we've seen this again and again. I mean, just in general, the cloud is that problem exactly to a T. A few more questions, and then we're going to get to playing our next game, and hopefully we'll have Mackenzie back. Steve Jaguar again asked this question. There are relatively new solutions for image provenance like Cosine in tandem with measures like SLSA. Are you using or looking at that at the moment? Are you, David?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have it in our company. We're using our...
And if you can explain too. Also.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned before, I think is in our own environment, like we build everything by source, right? So even let's say OpenSSL, yep, we build everything from source. We don't take a single external library, those type of things. But I think it's one of the luxuries we have as a technology provider, right? And I think this is where I think small and medium companies that don't have that kind of capabilities are looking at those other types of tools, right? Of the supply chain security, CI/CD pipeline, validation. And I think it's critical because especially of the challenges in open source, and we're seeing again and again of not just libraries being pulled and that have been compromised, but also compromised of build systems. Just like I think the CodeCov incident that occurred, was it a year ago or 2 years ago now? Time flies.
All right, here's just a basic question on education here that comes from Roger. And I don't know how deep you yourself educated yourself on Kubernetes, but maybe you can answer for what your team did. What would you recommend to help learning Kubernetes better, starting place or certifications that are worth investigating? Any sort of insight or maybe what your team did?
Well, I think there's a ton of great technology out there. I must say that, not to make a plug, but like I'm a big fan of Coursera, right? I think for a lot of people getting started and learning new things, right, for a very low cost, hopping onto Coursera, getting your kind of diving in a little bit and learning things, it's quite amazing. All the other cloud providers, Oracle as well, is having their universities and other things, and it's great to really get that first start. And I highly recommend it because it's such low cost for really getting introduced.
By the way, Jason Day has joined us. Jason, we have not met before. You look a lot like Mackenzie Jackson.
Oh man, I have been tech supporting like hell in the background.
All right. Well, are you still on the same network, or are you on a different network now?
I'm on a different network, but I managed to. But I couldn't get back in for some reason on the same account, so I created a new account.
Oh.
Okay.
Because I love how you grab those credentials and you're impersonating and moving laterally, right?
Everyone, we are closing the poll. By the way, you have exactly 60 seconds to get into the poll and vote. And there's a lot of you out there that I know have not voted. So please get in there and vote. And remember, we are just 20 minutes away from ending this. And that also means we're going to be rolling into our our meetup portion. So stick around for that, for the meetup portion at the end of all of this. All right, Mackenzie, there were a bunch of questions go by. I don't know with all your tech support if you were following any of the questions. Just to catch you up, because I don't want to run into the next thing with that. Was there any question that came up? They're like, oh my God, I wish I was on to answer that. Was there anything?
Well, there's a couple of things that a lot of questions about hardening. How do you harden your container images and areas like that, and what to do? And I feel like there's just a couple of tips, and there's a couple of questions about how to start. So there's a couple of tips that I love to have with simple things, like using, if you're building Docker containers, using a Docker ignore file, and making sure that files that may contain secrets don't end up in there. Little things like that, and making sure that you start off with a really solid base image. A really, when you're building up your container, use a really solid base image that you understand, and do it slowly. Make the transition to containers slowly. So that was just what I wanted to say. There was some questions there about how to start.
Some good advice.
They're really, really what I was hoping to chime in with.
All right. Well, guess what? The poll is now closed, and we have a call.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. So we have all our bad ideas have been sent in, and hopefully in the back channel. Did we have the names of the people who submitted these in the back channel? And also the 10% better poll is being opened up right now as well. But if you could just speak up at the chat room if this is your bad idea. Remember, you both know how this game is played. You have to tell us why you want to do this. And again, can't be facetious. Tell me legitimately why you want to pull this off. Mackenzie, not like you have had enough stress already dealing with getting back online, but here you go again with the Department of Yes. This great piece of bad advice is containers should be accessible anonymously. It saves time. Why do you want to do this?
Well, I mean, that's anonymity is the cornerstone of security, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. If you don't know what's happening out there, then you have security by obscurity.
But this is people entering your environment too. That's the point that it's not you going outside; it's people coming in.
I know. But one of the reasons why this might be also a very good idea is because one of the biggest challenges security people face is knowing when you have a problem, and that creates compliance issues. If everyone's anonymous, you never know that you have an issue, so you never have any compliance issues.
Okay, you just saved yourself. I was about to give you this, but you saved it with that. All right, good job. Just in the nick of time, Mackenzie or Jason, whoever named you're going by. David, why do you want to do this?
Which one? Sorry.
This is containers should be accessible anonymously. It saves time.
Oh, no. I think the element is then if you then just have your logs, we all rely upon after the fact what's in the logs. And if the logs are have no context whatsoever, you pretty much have no idea what happened, what do you do, or how to fix it, or when did it occur, etc. So I think that's one of the things that jumps to mind from my perspective.
I don't see how that's a benefit.
Sir, no, sir!
Where is that a benefit? David, you're not winning this one.
What's the one benefit? The one thing is, okay, I could be bad. Give you the bad idea. Is the bad idea?
That is the bad idea. You have to explain why you want to deploy it.
The only thing I could say, the scale and performance is that much better, right? Because you don't have to do all the authentication, slow things down, etc.
There you go. Much better. All right. Just you and Mackenzie are just pulling it out at the last second. All right. Here's the other bad idea. Oh, I didn't see who submitted that last one. Who submitted the last one? Here, let me go through. Did anyone? No one's taking credit for the last one. Anyone going to take credit for the last one? Well, please do. All right. For this one, this is the running all containers in the default namespace. Why do you want to do this?
Running all containers in the default namespace, it means that you're able to deploy much faster. You can use the same system setups for all your containers, and you don't have to bog down. And the defaults always remain the same. So you can always be sure that if you're going to have vulnerabilities, at least you're always going to have the same vulnerabilities. So you don't have to worry about new ones.
Okay, I'll give that to you. David?
On this one, I can say that everything works. Nothing's broken. Nothing's blocked. You never have to worry about application compatibility, right? So that we use the same namespace, you know everything's going to work perfectly.
Excellent. Very, very good. Here, let me give that to you.
Oh, yeah!
So I do want to give credit to Steve Jaguar, who was responsible for that last one and the one previously, Buckaroo B. I'm assuming that's Buckaroo Banzai, is that very last one as well.
Oh,
All right.
The movie. You got to remember that movie.
I do remember that, Buckaroo Banzai. Yes. Okay. Or don't close out the 10% poll. You can leave it open for a little while. Leave it open. Well, we only have two things in here. One of them I already mentioned, but build security from planning a product through production. That's well known, and that's the best advice we got here. So just to point out that we only got two pieces of tips, two pieces of advice from our community on how to secure containers. So either they're thrilled for your advice, and they have known advice of their own, or our audience never has good security tips ever, or only two people do. I like to mock them regardless. Either way. Thank you very much, audience, for your bad advice and your good advice as well. All right, we got a little bit of time left. Any questions? No, we actually gone through all our questions. So let me go through some of my questions. All right. We talked a little bit about secrets at the beginning, and I know this is the bailiwick for GitGuardian. Let's talk about secrets being maintained in containers, Mackenzie, and please feel free to talk about what GitGuardian is doing here.
For sure. So, I mean, when you're talking about secrets management, this is a really complex task. So what GitGuardian really specializes in is secrets detection. And we have really great tools that can quickly scan Docker images. So we have one called GG Shield. You can plug it into your pipelines and how you're building your images, and you can scan them for secrets. And this will uncover secrets that are not only in your image, but also in your Docker file and the layers of how you build that up. So there's some really great tools in there. But when it comes to managing secrets, in Docker and other areas, it can be quite challenging because a lot of the secrets that you're dealing with are really for your infrastructure. So these are both really kind of vulnerable, but they also can be difficult to know. So you always want to make sure that you're never hard coding your secrets and that they're being stored in a local memory. And the best practice that you can have is have a secret server that can dynamically deliver your secrets when your application calls them, and then destroy them after they've been used. And so that's really like.
I'm assuming that's what you do at GitGuardian.
That's not what we do. We do secrets detection. We're the best at secrets detection. So, one of the things is you really have to understand where your secrets are and where they're slipping out, because only then when you know can you actually start to fix the problem. But I always like to talk about managing secrets because, your secrets are always going to continue leaking unless you solve the problem. We can identify what the problem is, but you also need to invest in solving that, which is using some tools to manage secrets. I'm getting a lot of nods from David, so I'm feeling good about my answer.
Absolutely. I agree 100%, right? You got to have the secrets management. They need to be rotated as soon as you use them, those type of things. It's critical. The other thing that I'll say as a developer is, you mentioned, in memory, I can't resist saying you're pinning the memory, right? You're encrypting the memory so it's not garbage collected out and ends up on a disk somewhere and an attacker or someone else finds it that way.
Of course. Yes. This is the argument for defense in depth, because the secure way to do things can also be the insecure way to do things if you're relying on every level. And that's why we all have jobs, because this is a very complex task and issue.
We spend an hour a week just discussing these complex issues. Okay. Let's talk about honey tokens. How can you secure your container registries using honey tokens? Have you done this before? And what role do these decoy credentials play in identifying unauthorized access attempts? Who wants to jump on this first? Mackenzie, you first.
Oh, I love honey tokens. So honey tokens, for those that don't know, honey tokens are fake credentials. that are designed to alert you if anyone tries to use them.
Yeah, and like honey pots, the idea.
They're
is-
like a honey pot. But
Yeah.
why honey tokens are so cool is that they're so lightweight that not only can you put them all through your environment, you can actually put them in other people's environments too. So if you want to find
That's
out
interesting.
if you want to find out if your infrastructure has been breached on some levels, if you purposely put honey tokens that are findable in there, and someone all of a sudden they start pinging off, then you know that you have an issue. And it can be a way to find out if someone's been able to even maybe break out of a container and get down to the host level of that, if you find secrets that can be found in that area. And I know that the code Cov came up a lot in this too. And one of what happened with code Cov is that they had access to all the environment variables when this tool was running, and you could actually put honey tokens in the code Cov's tool as your own secrets and find out if that tool had been breached. So you can do this for not only just for your own infrastructure and your own things, but you can actually do this in your registries, in your tools, everywhere. So you can find out if an attacker has managed to break out and exactly where they are.
Yeah, and one of the things that I keep hearing about honey tokens and honey tools, if you're only using them as a defense mechanism and not an actual learning mechanism to increase your capabilities, you are not using them correctly. They should be used to gain knowledge of attacks and change your strategy accordingly. David, have you used honey tokens yourself?
Well, I can say over the years, right? I think there's a bit of a honey tokens I like are much better than honey pots. Right? Honey pots can actually be, boy, you get a collection of useless information sometimes, and are you going to actually manage it, right? And I think it's one of the important points with using honey tokens is be careful what you wish for, right? You have to very carefully plan it and be ready to manage it and monitor it, and versus it's not a silver bullet, if you will, right? But I'm also very excited like how you can use honey tokens in places like where at risk that you may not be expecting or monitoring as much, like in your code repositories, your image repositories, or even things like your Confluence pages. Right, we've seen various attacks around the industry. Is then it can really give you a hint, an insight on where are attackers or even insiders doing things. Right, so it can give you a lot of insights. But plan it very carefully. Just don't randomly do it, because I think you may not know how to act upon it.
Very, very good point. All right. Before we go, let me just do a quick wrap-up thing, and then I will let the two of you have your last thoughts on this. Audience, because this is going to change in a few minutes, not right now, but the link at the bottom of the screen is for next week's Super Cyber Friday. Please click that now to register for next week. If for some reason you have an inability to move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen and click on it, you can always go to CISOseries.com and see that event and all our other events as well. But just a quick wrap up, and then we'll come back. And then please stick around because we're going to do our meetup later. Here, I just got to get through. We have to realize I have to make two different things here. Okay. So next scheduled show is Hacking the Risks and Rewards of AI, an hour of critical thinking about how to safely embrace this emerging technology. Again, the link is at the bottom of the screen. Take advantage of it. Huge thanks to Mackenzie's company, GetGuardian. That is their logo. It doesn't say GetGuardian, but if you go to gitguardian.com, you can actually make it to their website and see all the cool things they're doing with secrets detection and securing your containers as well. All right, starting in really 97 minutes from now, Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review, we have the CISO of Ashland, Bob Shooter, will be our guest. We take the top 8 stories of the week in the news, and we give you some context of what the heck they mean. And when I say week in the news, week in cybersecurity news as well. Hey, stick around for our meetup. You can go ahead and change that link at the bottom of the screen, Aaron or Rich, whoever is handling that. And there it is. Magic.
Hey, David, I was going to say, can I share something? I'm going to say, I always love the weekly news, meetups or recaps, things like that. So sorry to give that plug, but I love it myself.
Please give a plug. Yeah, David is always there. He loves to join that. It's, by the way, it's over on YouTube. I forgot to mention that. Here, let me go back. If you go to the CISO series YouTube, and David has actually been a guest on that show as well. It's 25 minutes. We just take the 8 big stories, and you get some context as well. If you go on YouTube, you can be actually a part of the chat as well during that time. Okay, stick around for our meetup. That's the link at the bottom of the screen now. You can click on that now and open up your chat window as well. And if you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday, we have 2 left in 2023. So just ping me at david@cisoseries.com, and we can make that all possible for you. All right. Now, with that being said, we have 6 minutes left in the show. I'll start with you, David. What have we not talked about with regard to container security that we should have been talking about? What did I miss?
Oh, good question. I think maybe the one thing is, how do we spend more time in the overall, the pipeline of things, right? I think supply chain, we talked about a little bit, right? But I think I think there's a big element of like how people are building, how they're monitoring their build environments, how they're monitoring, their supply chain. And I think that's maybe something that leads, to greater container security, over the long run.
Mackenzie, would you add to that? And can you also answer my question?
No, I mean, I completely agree with David. From my perspective of what have we missed? What should we also talk about? I have one thing that I find huge in containers, and that what I'd like to try and get people to understand is when you build your container is built up in layers, and that means that you can actually go back in time for when you're building your container and actually find out if you've done things. So when we've been talking about things like secrets or adding in like vulnerable dependencies or anything like that, a lot of people think that if they add them in and destroy them later, then they're not there visible. But just like you can go back in history in your Git repositories, you can go back in history in your Docker images of your layers. So I just like to always point that out. What we haven't talked about is some of the complexities around containers that, your dirty laundry lives on for a long time in those containers. So always make sure to do the best practices the entire way through, and don't rely on destroying any evidence in the process, because it's all recoverable.
Very good point. Here, the quick question that just came in from Ming Fu on our discussion on honey tokens. Isn't a honey token a post-attack indicator? And I would say it's an in-progress attack indicator, yes?
David, you took my line. I saw that. I was so prepared for that question. I've never been prepared for a question in my life. Yeah, it is. But I think what the great thing about honey tokens, if you look at the time frame of attack, especially something like a supply chain attack, when the attackers actually compromise the component in your supply chain to when they actually launching the attacks, this can be weeks, often it's months. It's not easy when an attacker breaks into a system to immediately be able to move out laterally. And one of the attackers are pretty predictable in the first thing they're going to do, try and identify secrets. So you're going to be able to find them very quickly. And the other area is you can also put honey tokens in your supply chain, and you could almost be the first to know. We have we have a free service called SaaS Sentinel. We've put honey tokens in all these different services like Circle CI and 1Password and everything like that. And you can actually see if any of those have been potentially breached by the fact that the honey tokens have been pinged. And so what's cool about that is, okay, it's an in-progress attack, but you might not have been attacked by it yet. So yeah, I'm very big on the screen. So
I know. Well, no, I'm just playing with the new features of version 2. Anything else from Ming's comment of like a post-attack, it's in progress. Obviously, you're learning behavior as well. What did we miss here on the discussion of honey tokens, David?
What did we miss? I think what did we miss? I think that is. It's really, you may have an insider problem sometimes more than you may have an outsider problem, right? There's one element of the outsiders coming in and laterally move, but sometimes, a lot of times, I think companies may find that internal people are hunting and looking and trying to use these, and that means you may have a bigger problem and a different type of monitoring than you may have needed to consider in the past.
Very good. All right, I think we're going to wrap this show up. I'm going to thank my guest, David Cross, who is the CISO of Oracle SaaS Cloud and also a developer advocate, Jason Day, aka Mackenzie Jackson. Who is Jason Day?
Jason Day is the guy, whenever I'm going into a conference and I don't want to be added to 1,000
You're Jason Day?
and things like that, I'm Jason Day.
Well, now everybody knows.
He's my alter ego for whenever I'm signing up for something slightly that I don't want my name attached to, or don't want to get spammed for.
Yeah. There's no way you're being identified right now. That's for sure. Thank you
I
very
need a new
much,
name now.
McKent. Thank you very much. For everyone wants to know about GetGuardian, obviously getguardian.com. You are very visible online. You are essentially the developer security socialite out there, endlessly traveling to events. So if you go to a security event pretty much all over Europe, you're pretty much there. Yes.
Pretty much. I'm at the 40th event of the year this
Holy
weekend.
moly, that's a lot. I hope you're getting your frequent flyer miles and your hotel points, for that matter. All right, I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank GetGuardian for sponsoring this event. I want to thank our audience as well. Now, for those of you who have never joined our meetup portion of the event, I want you to do that right now. So the button at the bottom of the screen says, please join the CISO Series meetup after today's chat. Would you go ahead and do that right now? And Aaron, our wonderful producer in the background, and also Rich producing, and Andrew as well. Thank all three of you. Aaron, take us out.